Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tiger Talk Thursday. We're already at episode 43 for transitioning to life after sports. Today we have Natalie Allport with us on the call. She is a snowboarder, former Canadian team and world tour snowboarder, competitive CrossFit athlete, creator, speaker, and entrepreneur. She is passionate. She's a passionate advocate for athlete mental health and gender equity in sports. So when I saw some of her stuff online, I couldn't wait to invite her in to join the conversation. So welcome, Natalie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked to chat.
Yeah. So let's go back. I know there's some history when I was reading up on you online, and it talks about how, you did have dreams of playing hockey one day, but the world of snowboarding became your field of sport. So talk to us, how did that happen? What was your younger athletic life like?
Yeah, I grew up I think I was like 3 years old when I told my parents I wanted to go to the Olympics. I was probably watching one of the Olympics on TV. I think they always tell me I was riding like my trike around, and they're like, "What sport?" I'm like, "I don't know," but I'm just like ripping around. And so I think I'm just like super active, definitely like an ADHD kid. And my dad says just like from day one, he was like trying to do like a lot of physical activities with me and, just kind of channel my energy into something productive. So sports. And I just love sports, love gym class, all those things. Hockey became my main sport. But I also grew up skiing and then I got into skateboarding. And so it kind of was a natural progression. One day I just found snowboarding and fell in love. I was not good at it. Other sports came maybe more naturally, but snowboarding for some reason is that one that was hard, but also I really still wanted to pursue it. And then it kind of just led to having to decide hockey, snowboarding, and yeah, ended up choosing snowboarding and just like spending every waking moment trying to get better at it.
And when did you step away from snowboarding?
So 2015 was when I retired from the national team program. And then kind of fun is that it's been, oof, I think that was 8 years ago. And now this is actually going to be my first season back snowboarding full time. So I've been through so many transitions, which is so crazy.
And that's exactly why I wanted to have you on, because I noticed on your website, you mentioned about leaving sport and as a snowboarder and having to go through some sort of panic attacks. Can you just share with some of the listeners that, I mean, the whole mission and vision behind these conversations is really to help those athletes struggling in silence across the globe. We've all gone through transitions. Maybe it's not sport. Some people transfer from sport right away into another avenue that kind of captures that excitement, and they don't feel the transition till a little bit later. But can you take us on that journey with you of what that was like, what you may have went through behind closed doors? Because I know you are just as passionate about mental health as I am. So kind of take us on that journey with you if you don't mind.
Yeah. So when I was snowboarding, I mean, like I was always like, can't wait till I'm old enough to just like leave, just snowboard, like. And I started getting really homesick once that actually happened. And I think I went through like a big transition in the sense of I went from winning all the local competitions and like national level stuff to all of a sudden I'm at World Cups and I'm fighting for a 30th place in the world. And it's when you're a young kid, you've had like maybe you obviously I had lots of injuries and different obstacles, but just being thrown out there and not really having the mental tools to handle it, it was just like a big transition for me. I think I really struggled through it. There's, especially in action sports, there's so many injuries and really crazy crashes that almost like you think of like a car crash and how your body will remember that trauma, and you can picture like maybe you're scared to drive again or to take a certain road. Same thing happens with some of those big tricks that you're like, I'm scared to try this trick again because I've had a huge crash or a huge injury, and
Mm.
I didn't really have the tools to handle it at the time. And so they kind of all stacked up, and I started experiencing anxiety attacks, panic attacks, and I wasn't really sure what they were coming from. And then I failed to qualify for the 2014 Olympics. And in 2015, started the season, just things felt off. I just didn't really feel like I wanted to be there anymore. And I wish I had the tools then, or like a resource that could tell me, hey, you're experiencing depression and trauma from these injuries and, things that maybe could have been worked through. So I decided to like kind of go all in on the season, keep, seeing if I really want to step away or go through it. I wasn't, of course I dedicated my whole life to this. I don't want to just like up and quit. Um, but as the season went on, I saw a lot of people close to me experience really like almost life-threatening injuries, just more of the politics of the sport, different things. It just, it wasn't getting better because I didn't really realize what it was that I was going through. And so I decided, okay, I'm gonna make the tough decision to actually walk away from this. And I didn't know if it was going to be a short break or like a full retirement. which ended up pretty much being a full retirement. And walked away from the sport thinking, perfect, like this will solve my mental health. Like it must be the sport, that it's really weighing on this. And I was not prepared for like that identity loss and all of that stuff. And it's funny because I had already started CrossFit and already had like started my career competing in that. I had already started a business. Like there was other things and things I was passionate about that I had built. But despite all of that, I still didn't, fully have the tools to handle that transition loss of, every day I go to the gym and people would ask about snowboarding. Suddenly I'm like, no, like now I'm just training in the gym to
Yeah.
get better at doing, gym stuff.
I know.
And same thing. And,
It
all of a
loses
sudden I'm
its
like,
luster, right? Going to the gym when you're not training for, I remember going to the gym one time after I played hockey and I was like, is this what I'm supposed to do for the rest of my life? This is awful. In terms
yeah,
of
I
not
have a
having
lot of
that
friends going
goal.
through that, and I try to, yeah, right, and I try to get them to come and train with me because I'm like, we'll have fun together. But yeah, it was really difficult, and so my anxiety, depression, those things got worse, and so I ended up going to my doctor, getting diagnosed, going to therapy, just trying everything to try to heal and get better and work through those things. And I think it's kind of taken me almost all of my 20s to really like go through the process of like what I went through and really unpack some of that stuff and just get into a better headspace.
Yeah. And you mentioned a lot, I didn't really have the tools at that time. So what would you say to your younger self if you could look back at some of those pivotal moments or transitions or moments of injury or when you did feel that way? What advice would you be giving your younger self as how you could have handled those situations differently?
I think give myself more grace and also, really just make sure that I'm focusing on the process a little bit more than the end results. I think as athletes, we get so tied to like, I need to make this Olympic team. I need to,
Yeah.
win this next competition instead of thinking, hey, like I love snowboarding. I want to do it and like professionally until I'm whatever years old. I'm looking at that as like a long-term thing, and it's like, hey, like just let me just enjoy it. Maybe it's going to take a few years before I start winning World Cups or
Yeah.
things like that, rather than the pressure. And then also saying like it's okay to reach out for help. You get scared of what are your teammates going to think? What are your competitors going to think? Are your coaches going to kick you off the team because they hear that you have fear and that could affect
Mm.
you trying and learning new tricks? Like there's so many of those things that were going through my head that didn't allow me to like actually reach out, open up, and then get the help that I needed that maybe could have helped me stick in the
Yeah.
sport for a little bit longer.
It's interesting that you say that because I do have some athletes that I work with, and one of the hockey players, she had reached out to me, and I had spoken to her team, and she reached out privately, and she was trying to work on some of the stuff that was coming up for her mentally. And it's funny, not funny, it's interesting to me how afraid we are in that moment to go and speak to the coach who has taken that position because they want to coach and make us better, right? And I was like, your coach is going to love that you want to go to her and share with her what you're going through so you can help navigate and put an action plan together. But it's like parents or people that love us most. It's just amazing to me how our younger selves, because we need attachment, right? We abandon our authenticity for that attachment. And so many times we won't ask for help. So that I love that you just shared that, because so for anyone that is listening, if you just go to the person, your coach, someone that really cares about you, they will be open to hearing what you have to say. And a lot of times they can see us struggling. They know we're struggling, but we don't open up about it, right? So then we don't let them in to be able to help us. So I love that you shared that. That's so important. And so over the years, what would you say has been your biggest lesson in learning in going through all this? I know when I speak to athletes, we talk a lot about, and this isn't, I didn't come up with this, but a lot of professional athletes that I've interviewed and we've spoken to, they really focus on sports or what you do. They're not who you are. Have you heard that saying before?
Yeah, my aunt's favorite saying that she'd always say to me is, "You're a human being, not a human doing," and
I love that.
that's one that I love and like I really try to resonate with. But I would say exactly what you just said is like the biggest lesson of really like just being proud of who I am rather than like just tying everything to what I do. Like even
Yeah.
recently, like it's funny how I thought that I had healed that, but recently I was going through this like imposter syndrome process where I was like, how come like I feel like I've had such great opportunities in the last year to go to different events and different things, and I'm hanging out with awesome like Olympic gold medalists and this, and I'm like, well, I didn't make the Olympics. And I think about those things and I'm like, that's still me processing like, why am I here, and attaching like, because I didn't get an Olympic gold medal, like I don't deserve to be here.
Yeah.
And then
Your
realizing like
worth.
people invited me there because of who I am and as a person and like the traits that I have, not just because of like my accomplishments on my snowboard. Of course, that's part of it and gets you into certain rooms as an athlete, right? Like some of the connections you make are because of your sport. But at the end of the day, like those relationships and connections are invested in and like built because of who you are as a person. And so it's been hard to like really separate that. And it's funny how like it keeps coming up. We're like, okay, I'm good. Like I'm really just proud of working with who I am. I'm more than an athlete. And then it's funny how like it comes up in
I
different
think the
paths. You have to,
competitive
yeah.
side of athletes, I mean, it's really ingrained in us, right? Like I'm one of those, like go hard at my goals, and I don't really know that that'll ever change. And I love that side of me because I've achieved a lot because of that. But then you can get stuck in that extreme world of like all or nothing, which I think sometimes as I become older, I'll be 42 next month. It's like, okay, settle down, J9. You're
Yeah.
not the same. And I love that you said you're learning to love the process. What an important piece of information for those of you that are listening. Because a lot of us are high achievers because one, we love to win. We're competitors, that's by nature, but it also comes along with a ton of external validation, right? What's your take on external versus internal validation on your journey of what you've gone through? Do you recognize times where you were totally feeding off the external validation? And what do you do to deepen your connection to self?
Yeah, 100%. I think even in the decision when I left the sport, one of the hard things that took me to process was, what are those like kids I went to high school with who told me I could never do this? And I was like proving them wrong. Like, what are they going to think? And I'm like, I don't even talk to those people.
Yeah.
Like, isn't it so crazy how this things that we went through as a kid, the times we were bullied and all these things, we remember it in our like nervous system, and we're still like trying to like get that validation. And so all of a sudden I was thinking, I was like, these people are in my life. Like what matters is what feels good to me. And at the
Yeah.
time, what felt right to me was leaving the sport. And now, as I, head back into it, as I'm going to be competing full time again this season, which
Yeah.
is
So
after I got getting
who are you competing with this season?
I'm going to be trying a whole new discipline. So free ride, which is like big mountain stuff. So it's separate from like slope style and
I
like
love it.
national team stuff. So I'm really excited. And I think it's like I'm able to go into that with the process of like I want to do this on my own terms, in my own way. I'm not doing this for my sponsors. I'm not doing this to like prove something to someone. It's because I just totally fell in love with the sport again. And I've been
Yeah.
able to work through the mental blocks I have around some of the fears and different things of riding. And it's like, okay, this is actually what I want to do again. I feel called to do it. So I think it's like tapping into that, like really like building that gut intuition and like leaning into it. And like, what do you feel called to do rather than like, what will people accept me if I do? Because, I feel like I could continue with just like competing at a high level in CrossFit or just creating the
Yeah.
content I do or whatever. But I'm like, I am willing to risk a lot to like go back into this high risk, expensive sport and get back to the level that I was. And
That
I'm
probably
like, I'm
taps
doing that
into that
because
side of you though that loves that arena, which is so important when athletes, I do think if they leave their sport, like how important it is to get back on the ice. Like for me, obviously, if you can't, concussions and those things, I talk to athletes, it's just not in the it's not something that they would even entertain. But for me, even after going through breast cancer, I mean, I skated, I almost died, but the feeling inside and like when you tap into that part of you that was such a big part of who you are probably accessing such a part of you that is it's just woven through your DNA.
yeah, and I there's a lot of athletes who are like, I will never touch, like they never touch their sport because they're
Y-
so done with it. Like they're,
Yeah.
and that's how I was when I left it originally. And so it's so crazy to me to be back here, but it really came from building a sense of identity outside of what I do, like really like, and healing things outside of what I do, right? Like there's obviously healing I need to do around the sport and my mental health, but there was a lot of stuff that while I was in the sport, I wasn't looking at like my relationships in my life, my all these other sides of myself that I really needed to like focus on and heal and grow and mature in also. And then falling back in love with just riding for fun. And I was like, wait, this is why I did it. And now all of a sudden I was like, and I actually love standing on the top of the run and dropping in with the pressure of a competition. Like I love that.
Mm.
And so it's like falling back in love with it in that process. But yeah, it's like learning to do things for fun too. Because I think as an athlete, like we often are told like you have no time to do anything like that's
For
fun.
sure.
And it's like actually taking time to do that makes you a better athlete when you're like in your training and it just extends your longevity.
No, I love that. And I feel like anyone listening might be like, okay, I hear you got to heal and we got to do all these things, but what does that mean? What are you specifically doing? I mean, I know for me, I do a lot of journaling and meditation when I went through some of my stuff. What is in your toolkit? What do you do?
Yeah, journaling huge for me. I feel
Okay.
like I am constantly like try to get to therapy too. And there's been times where I've like been out of therapy and times where I go back in therapy
Yeah.
and it actually usually doesn't even correlate with like am I doing like not well emotionally. It's literally just like, hey, I have something to work through. I want
I
to
know
like
there's
get
such a
back.
negative connotation attached to therapy, and it's like it's an outside
No.
perspective that's going to give you that take the blind help you take your blinders off to see a perspective, allow you to reframe, and then you can get to work on what you need to. I think so, but how was that
Yes.
experience like for you?
I agree entirely. It's like having that third party perspective and someone who can help you go deeper. And so sometimes, like for me, that can mean, okay, maybe it's not therapy, but it's I'm listening to podcasts. I'm like putting myself into more uncomfortable situations, meeting new people. I think like relationships are big mirrors too. So like you're learning and then reflecting. So it's like taking time to reflect after those things. If you're just like going rah, 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 doing things and you're never reflecting. Like in the
I like
summer,
how
I would
you said
spend,
relationships are like big mirrors too.
yes,
Is that what I heard? That's what you said,
yes,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Can you explain that to the listeners? Because I think I know what you mean, but I just want to make sure people hearing that can actually like digest what you mean by that.
Yeah, I think like you can only learn so much about yourself like when you're only by yourself. Like I think also in relation to others, you see how you act, how you react to
Mhm.
certain things, what are your triggers, how you treat people. Like you can really get a sense of like who you want to be and how you want to act. And so like it's spending time reflecting after that. Like I say like driving is like my therapy. And my phone probably has like every time I'm in my car, I have like an hour voice note. And it's like actually me just talking with myself, going through because I can't journal because I'm driving. And I ask myself questions the same way that you would in therapy, and
I
I
love that.
process things. And by the end, I'm like, oh wow, I just talked through an hour of like learning who I am and processing this. And same thing on planes and journaling. And this summer, I was big on like I would go down to the river at the end of the day, and no matter how chaotic life got, I was still like journaling and processing. And you can start like you start journaling, and by the end, you like at a whole different tangent. You like actually like process something. So there's a lot of like deep self work that you can do by yourself that are like no cost. But I think getting that guidance from therapy or like reading books or podcasts or different things that can guide you where to go, like what questions to ask, like what shadow work is, all those types of things can help
Yeah.
you. Yeah, it can definitely help. And then you have to commit to the self work because I know a lot of people that just show up to therapy because they have to or something, and they don't do the self work either. It's like goes hand in hand.
No, I totally agree. And just like we train physically for our sport, mental fitness is its own arena. Like there it is a game all in its own. I mean, from a morning routine to a nightly routine to constant reflection throughout the day. I mean, it's not easy and understand why a lot of people avoid it at first, but you eventually hit a point where there's no avoiding it anymore. It's like you can't not go there and for me it took breast cancer really to like hit me upside the head. And I was always someone who would do a lot of work, but even though I played in, NCAA hockey and then the National Women's Hockey League, and then I had gone through divorce and bankruptcy, it was breast cancer. Like I had to go through all that. That's how stubborn I am. But
No, but I think it's timing,
yeah,
right?
absolutely. And I love you're so self-aware. How old are you?
I just turned 30, which
30.
is crazy because the other day someone asked me, they're like,
You look a
I
lot
think you're
younger than
18.
30.
I'm like, oh.
Yeah. No, but you're so self-aware and there's so many golden nuggets that you shared there. And I love that you're being so open and raw and real. What would you say for anyone listening? Because sometimes I think they feel we see the highlight reel on social media, right? But we don't really see how long would you say that period was for you where it was a very uncertain time frame? Like I think some people think you just get over it like in a night or two, and it's not the case. It can be like 2 years of healing. Like how long was that process for you? And you're still doing it. I get that this is an
Oh yeah.
everyday thing. We're always growing, but how long would you say that period of that darker period before you kind of that light bulb turned back on again lasted for you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the kind words. I appreciate it. I mean, yeah, I think like self-awareness, mindset, like those are things I'm just working on a lot. So when someone mentions it, it means a lot to me. But also, yeah, it was a long process. I think, and it's oftentimes that I think what catches us up is that, yeah, like you said, it's like, oh, boom, I'm healed. Like I went to therapy all summer. Cool.
Yeah.
And then it's like, no,
No, no.
it's like when I look back at even like last year, like how much I've learned from the past year, it's crazy. So the a constant process. But I would say like, especially with that, like the switching out of snowboarding part, this was 2015. That first year, 2 years were tough. There was a few years in there that I was on depression and anxiety medication as well. I think it was 2018 when I stopped taking that, and it was a really powerful tool for me to kind of like alleviate like that daily like real struggle that I was like to wake up and like go through the
Yeah.
day. Um, and then I'm gonna say like probably like it took until like during the pandemic because then I think it was like I was feeling in a good place, but then I think when the pandemic happened, all of a sudden it was like another level of healing because you had so much more time with yourself,
Yeah.
so much reflection. And I had tore my rotator cuff, so I was actually out of CrossFit competition, and then the gyms were all closed. So I actually had to really fully sit with myself and think, what if like I have absolutely no sports? Like, how would
Mm,
I be? And I actually came
yeah.
fully to terms with if my shoulder never heals, if the gym stay closed forever, like I think that I will be okay. And then my shoulder got better, the gyms opened, I fell back in love with snowboarding, and things changed. And so now I'm chasing sport goals again. But I got to the point where it was like, no, I think this is okay. But again,
Well, you
that was like
surrendered.
a long
I feel
process.
like when people finally let that wall down and they're resisting, the first step is surrender. And you surrendered to the possibility of, okay, if this is not going to be part of my life, right? But obviously, anyone who works out, I mean, we've got you've got your feel good hormones, you got serotonin, all the things flowing through you, right? Um, what's the other word? I'm drawing a blank on. Oxytocin, well, that's when you play sport, but serotonin, oh my goodness, the feel good hormones.
Dopamine, maybe?
Yeah, dopamine. Sorry. Thank you. Yes. When you're exercising. And I mean, that's a big one why athletes suffer right away because they go from training all the time. So it's actually a hormonal imbalance right away. But
Yes.
I just want people listening to understand like that was a 5-year process for you. It still is, but we resist until we can't no further. But I just want people to understand there's no quick fix here. It's a constant self-observation. And then you pattern interrupt, right? You understand, like, I love that you said triggers. I mean, I recognize like my husband will trigger me in the kitchen and I'll be like, he didn't say anything wrong, but I just flew off the handle there. And what did that just pull out in me? And then I have to, reevaluate and take a step back. And then I'm apologizing because I'm like, I'm sorry, you said this, but this came up for me, or I'm trying to deal with this and I'm projecting onto you, right? And having that self-awareness is so key to the relationships in your life. So I love that you've touched on all of that. Very empowering. Well, and I love that you're back in sport and you're going to be competing in something new. So that's amazing. Any final words for our viewers that maybe I didn't ask or come up? I mean, I know you've got that creative entrepreneurial side of you, which is amazing. Obviously the focus is on transitioning to life after sports, and you've gone back and you're finding that love again for um another lane for you to be in. But for someone who's sitting on the other side of this interview and they're really struggling, what would be that, your top 3 pieces of advice to them to make sure they can take that next step forward? What would you recommend they do?
Yeah, I think be kind with yourself in the process and don't like be harsh on yourself and critiquing. Like I felt that way where I was like, okay, well, I have all these other things in front of me. Why can't I get over this? Right. And like what you said with, it is partially chemical. Like that was a big thing that my therapist helped me realize was, especially with action sports, like I was used to like an adrenaline feeling
Yeah,
all day where I'm like combating this fear, hitting this like huge jump and doing tricks that are scary. So it's like when I didn't get that, I was trying to seek it in other ways. So it's
of
like maybe
course.
like creating an argument with a friend or just like seeking out being like, hey, my friend didn't text me back. Like they hate me. There's like finding different ways to create stress in your life because you're not getting it from your sport the same way. So
Yeah, I
I
love
think just
that.
give yourself grace and understand that it's more than just, it is chemical. So there's still a lot of things moving, a lot of moving parts that are going to take a while to heal, no matter how hard you're like pushing and trying. The next one is, I think being vulnerable. Like I think like being open and vulnerable and having conversations because I used to think, I was like, oh, I wish my friends like would rely on me more. Like we'd have deeper conversations. And I didn't realize it wasn't until like I started leading with vulnerability and having those conversations and being like, hey, like I cried yesterday because of this. Then all of a sudden they're like, hey, me too. And now
Yeah.
it's like they text me or they call me whenever they're in a situation. And I'm like, wow, I'm so grateful for these friendships where we can just text and call and talk about these deep topics. But it only became that way because one person finally opened up and
You have
like
to open
created
the
that
door
depth.
for sure.
And yeah, so I think so I think number one, give yourself grace. Number two, lead with vulnerabilities. You can create those relationships that are going to help you and help others. And then number three, I think would be try to push yourself to do things, whether they're outside your comfort zone or just like that are enjoyable to you,
Yeah.
that maybe don't lead to like a certain goal. Like if everything in your life, even your healing is like for a certain goal, it's
Yeah.
just like you're still reinforcing those same
Yeah.
patterns
It
that,
doesn't
that we
mean the
have
same
in
if it's like,
sport.
I meditated for 70 minutes and yeah, no. It's
Yeah,
about
it's like I won
consistency. Yeah.
meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So it's like just like letting yourself just like exist in some
Yeah.
points and just different spaces and experience things rather than all for like to
Mm,
hit some target.
I love that. key things: grace, vulnerability, and enjoying the process, really, right? As opposed to
Yeah.
making it a huge goal and trying something new and outside of your comfort zone. So important. Such great nuggets. Natalie, it's been a pleasure having you join the conversation. I honestly can't believe this is episode 43 already. Tiger Talk Thursday, transitioning to life after sports. And we've got Natalie Allport here with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.